They looked like the perfect family, or at least that's what everyone believed, behind the towering gates of their luxurious mansion in the city's wealthiest neighborhood. The father, a pharmaceutical tycoon, the mother, a former model turned influencer, and their daughter, beautiful, charismatic, and heir to a fortune that kept growing like wildfire. But on one cold, silent night, everything fell apart. Muffled screams, distant gunshots, and within minutes the mansion turned into a blood-soaked crime scene. When police arrived, what they found was straight out of a nightmare: broken doors, bloodstains on the walls, and 3 motionless bodies. The entire city woke up to terror. News channels cut regular programming. Social media exploded. How could something so brutal happen to such a powerful family? And more importantly, why? Panic spread like wildfire. The city, used to political scandals and street crime, had never seen anything like it. The Costa mansion became a dark tourist attraction. Cars stopped just to catch a glimpse through the gates. News helicopters hovered overhead. Wild theories erupted online. Was it a love affair gone wrong? Corporate revenge? A family feud? The media fed the frenzy, but no one had real answers. Just fear. Raw, palpable fear. Because if this could happen to them, the rich, the untouchable, what hope did the rest have? For the first time in years, the city felt vulnerable, and everyone wanted someone to blame. Then came the first major twist. One of the bodies disappeared. That's right. Just hours after authorities arrived, forensic teams discovered that Bianca Costa, the daughter, was missing. Gone. Was she kidnapped? On the run? Or involved? Security cameras wiped clean. Not a single frame from the night of the crime. Strange, right? In a mansion with 24/7 surveillance, everything just vanished. The police gave technical excuses, but no one bought it. Whispers of a cover-up spread fast. Something smelled wrong. The public's curiosity turned into obsession. But in the background, away from the noise, someone else was watching. The most disturbing part wasn't just the violence. It was the complete silence surrounding it. No neighbor saw anything. No staff member noticed odd behavior. It was like ghosts had executed the attack. Silent, ruthless, invisible. The mystery turned into a national sensation. Talk shows, true crime podcasts, YouTube channels. Everyone was talking about the Costa massacre. But in the shadows of the chaos, someone quietly connected the dots. An ordinary man, a forgotten figure, a driver, and no one knew, yet, that he would soon become the only person capable of revealing the truth. But before the world would hear his name, there was only silence. A city frozen in fear, families locking their doors, children too scared to sleep, wild theories replacing facts. Yes, the Costas had enemies. But would someone really dare strike so boldly? It didn't make sense. The brutality, the precision, the vanishing evidence, everything felt staged, like it was built to confuse. And it worked. Fear turned to paranoia. The people wanted justice, but there were no suspects. Authorities looked clueless, and the sense of impunity grew like a wound across the city's pride. Yet deep within the darkness, something was stirring. A spark, from someone no one saw coming. The city demanded answers, but all it got was a disgraceful string of failures. The police, quick to appear in front of cameras, looked more like actors in a bad play than actual investigators. Press conferences became laughable, empty promises, rehearsed speeches, and zero real answers. The lead detective, known more for shaking hands than solving crimes, could barely hide his discomfort. "We're exploring all leads," he kept repeating like a broken record. But everyone knew the truth. They were lost. Worse, they seemed more focused on protecting their image than catching whoever had done this. Days passed, weeks even, and nothing changed. With each passing moment, trust in the system eroded. People began to say out loud what they once only whispered. Are they covering something up? Social media turned into a digital courtroom, with investigators as the first ones on trial. Memes, satirical videos, mock voiceovers of the police statements. The incompetence wasn't just obvious, it was laughable. Anonymous sources hinted at lost evidence. Some files, they said, simply disappeared. High crime that should have received top priority was now buried under a mountain of neglect, or worse, corruption. One of the most outrageous decisions came just 48 hours after the crime. Authorities cleared the Costa mansion, declaring the investigation site processed. But forensic experts disagreed strongly. They said no full analysis could be completed that fast, not in a house that size. The public was furious. "They're covering something up," became the city's new mantra. A neighbor's cell phone photos showed workers carrying out boxes and black bags. The police gave no explanation. What was once a suspicion turned into certainty. The police weren't just incompetent, they were compromised. Still, the official narrative pushed forward. "We're making progress," they insisted, but there were no arrests, no suspects, no solid leads, just recycled statements and hollow reassurances. The people had enough. They took to the streets. Peaceful protests outside police headquarters, handmade signs, chants demanding justice. The media, once compliant, started asking harder questions, and with every unanswered one, the pressure grew. The failure of the authorities was no longer a theory. It was now a fact, exposed and undeniable. The system was cracked wide open, and in the middle of that rotten chaos, someone was quietly paying attention. A man no one noticed. Not a detective, not a journalist, just a driver. But he saw the cracks. He listened, observed, took notes, not out of curiosity, but because he felt it deep down. If justice was going to be served, it wouldn't come from the top. The police had failed. The system was blind, so someone else had to step up. And without realizing it, the city's salvation had already begun. In the shadows behind the wheel, no one ever noticed him. To the world, he was just the driver. The man in the plain clothes parked off to the side of the mansion, quietly waiting in his car for hours. Polite, silent, invisible. The kind of man the wealthy are trained to ignore, and that's exactly why he saw what no one else did. His name was Elias, 47, widowed, 2 teenage kids. He'd worked for the Costa family for just over 6 months, never invited inside, never called by his name, just there, an unseen witness to a life far removed from his own, until everything changed. The night of the crime, Elias had just finished a shift. He was only 2 blocks away from the Costa estate, dropping off a rideshare client from his side job. When he heard the gunshots, a cold chill ran through him. It wasn't the first time he'd heard that sound. He knew violence, he knew fear, but something felt different. Instinct pulled him back toward the mansion. He arrived before the police, and what he saw even from a distance haunted him, a shadowy figure running out the back, carrying something in their arms. He couldn't see the face, but he saw the car, he saw the license plate, and without thinking, he filmed it, out of reflex, out of survival. The next morning, no one asked Elias what he saw. No cops, no reporters. It was like he didn't exist, but the image of that car burned in his mind. Over the next few days, he went back to the crime scene, watching from afar, waiting for any mention of what he'd witnessed. Nothing. No report matched what he saw. And that's when it hit him. That piece of information was his alone. And maybe, just maybe, it was the only real clue that existed. Everything else, lies, a show for the cameras. Elias, the invisible man, now carried a dangerous secret. He tried to forget, saved the video to a flash drive, deleted it from his phone, hid it in his car, but it ate at him. Nightmares crept in, screams, blood. Bianca Costa, the daughter, pleading for help. He'd wake up gasping, soaked in sweat. He knew, if he stayed silent, he'd live with that guilt forever. But if he spoke up, he might not live long at all. He wasn't a hero, just a man trying to keep his kids safe. But something had changed. That moment at the mansion, it was a calling, one he couldn't ignore. So he acted. First, he retraced his steps, visited the spot where he saw the car. Then he searched for that make and model across the city. By day, he drove passengers. By night, he hunted. And the deeper he went, the clearer it became. The justice system wasn't blind. It was intentionally looking the other way. That car, it belonged to someone powerful, very powerful. And recording it had thrown Elias into a dangerous game. But unlike the police, he wasn't backing down. At first, Elias thought it was just the right thing to do. He had seen something important, something that could change the course of the entire investigation. But the deeper he dug, the more he felt this wasn't just about justice. It was something personal, painful, a ghost from his past that he had buried long ago, now clawing its way back. It started with a news report playing in the background as he washed the dishes. A photo, the Costa daughter, Bianca. Her full name, Bianca Menezes Costa. Menezes, a last name Elias knew all too well, a name he had tried to forget. Bianca's mother, Helena Menezes, wasn't just a socialite or the wife of a millionaire. She was Elias's first love, They had grown up together, neighbors in the slums, inseparable, until one day she vanished. Her family had gotten an offer. Someone powerful wanted to sponsor her education at an elite private school. Within a week, she was gone. New life, new world, no goodbye. Elias stayed behind, in the mud, in the same neighborhood, in the same heartbreak. Years later, he heard she had married rich, disappeared into a life of luxury, never looking back. He had worked hard to erase her from his mind, built his own family, lost his wife to cancer, raised his sons through sacrifice and struggle. But seeing the name Menezes again reopened something, and worse, it raised questions. Could Helena really have chosen to live with a man like Ricardo Costa, a man known for corruption, lies, and hidden crimes? Elias doubted it. Maybe Bianca never even knew the truth about her own origins. And then, a thought, a terrifying, electrifying thought. What if this crime wasn't just about money or power? What if it was about blood, about identity, about a secret hidden for decades? Elias began to dig into his memories, old photos, youthful letters. He studied Bianca's face, her voice, her expressions, and something clicked. The timeline matched, the way Helena disappeared, the silence, the lies. Everything made sense. And suddenly, it all became too real. What if Bianca was his daughter, the daughter he never met, the daughter he never got to love? And now, maybe it was already too late. Maybe she was already gone, murdered, silenced, erased. The investigation was no longer just about justice. It was about blood, about legacy, about the pain of a stolen life. From that moment on, Elias changed. He was no longer just a man with a secret. He was a man on a mission. A man who needed answers, not just to find the killer, but to confront the past that had robbed him of everything. Bianca might still be alive, or she might be buried in the silence left behind. Either way, he couldn't walk away. Silence was cowardice, and Elias was done being a coward. His past had come knocking, and this time, he would answer. It happened on a Saturday afternoon. Elias had lost track of how many hours he'd spent poring over images from that night, photos, leaked videos, screenshots from news reports. He had no official access, of course, just scraps. But it was enough. While the police focused on blood-smeared walls, broken safes, and tampered electronics, Elias looked where no one else cared to: the floor. More specifically, the rug in the main living room. In one of the photos, barely noticeable, it was there. A small object, neutral in color, half hidden beneath the edge of a sofa, something no one had mentioned in reports, something that didn't belong, a small metal button, round, industrial. Elias zoomed in again and again until the shape became clear. It wasn't part of the Costa household. It belonged to a security uniform. He knew it well. He wore the same kind in his executive driving job. It was from a tactical blazer, the kind used by private security firms. He froze. If someone lost that inside the Costa mansion, it meant someone on the inside was involved. Someone who was supposed to protect had betrayed. A guard, an infiltrator, maybe even a cop. That forgotten button changed everything. He returned to the crime scene, abandoned now, empty, taped off by the authorities but loosely. He slipped through the back fence and entered through the garage. He knew the way. There it was, the rug, the sofa, still covered with a dirty sheet. And yes, the button was still there, as if it had waited for him. He picked it up using disposable gloves, sealed it in a plastic envelope, and locked it in his car's glove box. Now he had more than just a video. He had physical proof, something that could link someone directly to the crime, and he knew exactly where to start digging. He remembered something critical. Just days before the massacre, the Costa family had changed security companies. A quiet switch, supposedly over contract issues. No one had questioned it at the time, but with the button in hand, Elias was sure this wasn't coincidence. He began tracking down former guards, scanning old photos, social media accounts, security company rosters, and then he found him. One man stood out, a shady past, former police officer, discharged for misconduct, hired for only 1 week at the Costa estate, gone the day after the murder. Elias felt the ground shift beneath him. The button, small forgotten, was now the thread pulling apart a conspiracy woven by powerful people. He stayed up for nights, mapping timelines, connecting names, uncovering truths no one dared to touch. That ex-guard had ties to local politicians, wealthy businessmen, people who had everything to lose, people who mingled at the Costa's lavish parties. This was no robbery, no random act. This was an orchestrated execution, and Elias, with that button in hand, now held the first domino in a chain reaction no one could stop. It was by connecting data no one else ever bothered to examine that Elias began to uncover what was really behind the curtain. The missing security guard, the one tied to the button, was employed by a firm called Vigilantes Group, a company specializing in high-risk protection. On the surface, it looked legitimate. But when Elias searched the company's registration data, something alarming appeared. It was founded by a former police chief who had once been investigated for covering up illegal operations. Even more disturbing, the current commander of the city's military police had previously been a business partner, though his name had been quietly removed from the company's records just months before the crime. Coincidence? No. It was the kind of detail you only overlook when you think no one will ever look. Elias was starting to grasp the scale of what he was up against. The Costa murders weren't random. They weren't impulsive. They were planned, precisely, and most terrifying of all, they were protected. The rushed investigation, the missing footage, the rapid cleanup of the crime scene, none of it was accidental. Every move had been calculated to cover something up. But the real question that haunted Elias was, why? Why wipe out an entire family? And why keep Bianca out of it? Missing, possibly alive. The answer came when he uncovered something chilling. Bianca was just days away from taking over her family's foundation, a non-profit handling millions in donations. A federal audit was scheduled for the same week of the murders. Digging deeper into the foundation's financial records, Elias found even more disturbing connections. Lawyers tied to corrupt politicians, shell companies used for money laundering, political families listed as frequent donors. It was a web, and every thread led to the same motive. Someone needed the family gone before the money trail was exposed. But still, something didn't add up. Why take such a massive risk? Why kill so publicly, so violently? Then it clicked. This wasn't just about money. It was personal. Bianca had found something or someone that made her a liability. The killers weren't just erasing evidence. They were hunting her. Soon, Elias realized he was being followed. A car parked near his home for hours. Motorcycles tailing him in traffic. Strangers asking about him at taxi stands. The conspiracy now had faces, eyes, and Elias wasn't just a bystander anymore. He was a threat. But that only confirmed he was on the right track. He began hiding documents in safe places. He shared his findings with an independent journalist. And he told his sons, "If anything happens to me, you know where to look." Paranoia became part of life, but fear no longer controlled him. The truth was close, dangerously close, and there was no turning back. In a final breakthrough, Elias discovered a payment made just days before the murders. It came from an offshore account linked to a shell corporation. The recipient, the missing guard, the same man from the button, the same man who vanished. The payment was laundered through cryptocurrency, then converted into cash and deposited into a bank account tied to the brother of the deputy chief of police. There was no more doubt. The conspiracy involved law enforcement, business elites, politicians, even members of the judiciary. The Costa murders weren't just a crime. They were a necessary sacrifice to protect a powerful machine. But what no one expected was that a forgotten driver held the one clue that could burn it all to the ground. Elias had always been a simple man. He never imagined he'd one day be standing alone against people with power, money, and influence far beyond his world. But now, there was no going back. With each new revelation, he sank deeper into a maze of lies, threats, and shadows. He was completely alone. No police, no protection, no guarantees. The few people he reached out to, old friends, former colleagues, backed off the moment he mentioned names tied to the city's elite law enforcement. Everyone was afraid, and rightfully so. The city was run like a dirty game, and anyone who tried to flip the table disappeared. But Elias pushed forward, even through fear, because something bigger than himself was driving him. Maybe it was the pain, maybe guilt, maybe the love for a daughter he never got to hold. His life became a survival mission. He swapped his bed for car seats, ate whatever he could, wherever he could. He lived in constant motion, slept with a knife under his seat, a cold gun in the glove box. He was paranoid, and for good reason. His car had been broken into 3 times, his phones cloned, Once, someone even tried to poison his food. The city he once knew had become a battlefield, and with every wrong step, it could all be over. Still, he pressed on. He investigated, took notes, cross-referenced names, dates, locations. He was building all on his own a dossier that, if placed in the right hands, could topple politicians, commanders, and CEOs. But that was the question. Whose hands could he trust? That's when he started recording everything. Using an old field reporter's voice recorder, he documented every piece of information, every call, every whisper. It wasn't just an investigation anymore. It was a testament, a lifeline. "If you're hearing this," he said in one of the tapes, "it means I didn't make it. But everything you need is here." These recordings became his most trusted ally. Every step he took, he made backups, stored copies in hidden places, uploaded to cloud storage under false names. The truth no longer depended on him alone, and that gave him strength, because even if they killed him, the truth would still rise, and that made him more dangerous than ever. But the isolation began to sting. Elias missed his sons, his routine, the sound of someone calling his name without fear. He was no longer the driver. He was the problem, the risk, the crazy man trying to burn the empire. Every street corner was a trap, every call, a threat in disguise. He stopped using social media, stopped answering unknown numbers, stopped going out in the daytime. He became a ghost, but a ghost with a mission, and that gave meaning to his pain. He wasn't chasing fame or revenge. He was chasing truth, dignity, justice, the kind no one else would deliver, and now rested solely on his shoulders. Then, in a moment of utter despair, he almost quit, almost destroyed everything, gave up. But then he saw it, a handwritten note left on his windshield. Just one sentence. "She's alive. Don't stop." The world froze. Elias trembled, cried like he hadn't cried in years, and in that moment, he knew he was closer than ever. Someone was out there, someone who knew, someone who believed, and just like that, his loneliness turned into purpose. He wasn't alone anymore. He had hope, the hope of finding Bianca, of proving that truth, no matter how deep it's buried, always comes back, and he would not stop until it did. Piece by piece, Elias began to realize that every step toward the truth came with a cost, and it was tearing him apart. The man who once dreamed of giving his sons a peaceful life could barely recognize his own face anymore. Deep under eye shadows, a tense jaw, eyes filled with paranoia and exhaustion, he was unraveling. Justice, masked as revenge, was draining what little he had left. He had lost his job. His children, once proud of his courage, now looked at him with fear and confusion. The only thing keeping him going was the knowledge that stopping now would be the same as dying while still breathing. There was no turning back. The truth had a price, and he was paying for it with everything he had. Days became heavy, time slowed, as if stuck inside a cracked hourglass. Elias now lived on the margins, not of the law, but of society. He no longer trusted anyone. He no longer belonged anywhere. Fear was his constant companion. Every glance, every noise, every shadow felt like a threat. He knew he was being watched. He knew there were silent orders to handle him. But what hurt the most wasn't the threat of death. It was the slow death of connection. He lost friends, lost his relationship with his kids, lost peace, lost the right to be ordinary. And even though he had chosen this path, he never expected it to be this lonely. Justice, when not served with clean hands, comes hand in hand with silence and sacrifice. There were moments when Elias questioned everything. Was it really worth it? Was fighting giants going to change anything, or would he just fall harder? He felt like a man swimming against a tidal wave while the world just watched. No one talked about the case anymore. The media went silent. The protests stopped. The city returned to its fake version of normal, and that broke him, because he knew the truth. He knew the Costa's blood, and maybe Bianca's, had been exchanged for power, deals, and silence. And now no one cared. It was him versus amnesia, versus comfort, versus the machine that buries truth under expensive carpets. One cold night, Elias hit his lowest point. Two men attacked him outside his car. They stole his phone, his notes, tried to choke him out. He fought back, survived, but something inside him shattered. For the first time, he considered disappearing, letting it go, letting the story die. But when he got home, bleeding, broken, he found an envelope under the door. Inside, a photo. Bianca, alive, tied up, eyes filled with terror, and a note. "It's not over." That was all it took. The fire came back. Elias screamed. He cried. He shook, but he stood. Because now, revenge wasn't a choice. It was a sentence, and he was ready to see it through. But he understood this now. The closer he got to the truth, the more he would lose. Revenge is hungry. It has teeth. It demands a toll. Every step took something. His peace, his softness, his soul. But maybe that's what this story required. A sacrifice. Someone willing to lose it all so the guilty would finally taste justice. Elias was no longer just a father, or a driver, or a man. He had become a bridge between silence and exposure. And if everything had to burn in the process, so be it. Because now he knew, the truth only shows itself to those willing to die for it. Everything was ready. Elias had gathered the evidence, recorded testimonies, connected the dots, identified those responsible, and built a bulletproof dossier. This was it, the climax of his fight, the moment he would hand everything to an independent journalist who promised to publish the truth through an offshore platform. He had planned every detail with military precision. The meeting point, a quiet coffee shop, off the radar. But what Elias didn't know was that the real enemy wasn't among the corrupt. It was hiding among the trusted. And just as justice was within reach, it was about to be ripped away by someone he once called friend. At the cafe, Elias felt something off. The journalist wasn't there. Instead, a familiar face, too familiar. Renato, his childhood friend, the only person he'd shared partial data with, just as a failsafe. Renato stood up, smiled, and with a hollow look said, "You went too far, Elias." Everything froze. He understood immediately. Betrayed, exposed, sold out. Renato had delivered the evidence to the wrong people. Worse, he had made copies. In seconds, everything Elias had built was crumbling. A trap. The cafe wasn't a meeting. It was a setup. Elias ran. No time to think. He was now marked, hunted, and the countdown had begun. In the days that followed, everything collapsed. Online sources deleted their reports. The journalist vanished. The server hosting the files went offline. Fake social media accounts began flooding the internet, painting Elias as mentally unstable, a criminal, a conspiracy theorist. Even a false police report was released, accusing him of attacking a public official. The system was in full defense mode, fighting back like a virus trying to kill its cure. Elias had become enemy number one, but deep down he knew, they only attack when you get too close to the truth, and even with nothing left, he still had something they couldn't erase, his memory. What he lived, they couldn't undo. And then, the impossible happened, the turning point. While hiding in the shadows, Elias received an anonymous message with a video file. It was footage from the night of the crime, raw, unedited, untouched. It showed the missing security guard entering through the back garage, carrying Bianca, alive. Behind him, two men with police badges. One of them, the deputy police commander, clearly visible in frame. The footage came from a private security camera, owned by a neighbor who had finally found the courage to speak up. Elias cried, laughed, screamed. There it was, the undeniable truth. This one video was everything. This time, Elias didn't contact any reporters, or news agencies, or platforms. He built his own, bought an international domain, uploaded the video, the evidence, the timeline, the names, the connections. He used online forums, international boards, and social media to make it go viral. Within 24 hours, the world was watching. Foreign headlines, international outrage, protests reignited. The pressure became too great. Even the mainstream media had to report on it. And now, the powerful were cornered. The game had changed. The driver no one saw was now the name on every screen. But none of that mattered to Elias. Because deep down, he knew this was never about him. It was about Bianca, about truth, about justice. And it had finally arrived. The day after the video went live, it was as if the world had woken from a collective trance. News stations that once ignored the truth aired emergency reports. Elias's name echoed across social media, city streets, and even the halls of government, but he was nowhere to be found. While the cameras hunted for a face to headline the story, Elias remained hidden in a modest room windows covered with bedsheets. He didn't want fame. He didn't want recognition. He just wanted to make sure that, for the first time in a long time, truth spoke louder than power. Because he knew the only justice that matters is the kind that doesn't need an audience. The arrests came quickly. First the guard, then the deputy commander. Then came the businessmen, politicians, even a judge, all exposed by documents, audio files, and one undeniable video. The once silent city now pulsed with movement. The same people who once mocked Elias now begged for his presence at rallies and public hearings. They wanted to see him, hear him, thank him, but Elias refused. Instead, he sent a single letter, read aloud on national TV. "I'm not a hero. I'm just a man who refused to be an accomplice. If a driver could stand up to this system, anyone can. And if they can't, they should still try." That was enough. In those few words, Elias had captured the heart of a nation tired of being silenced. He had become a symbol against his will. Eventually, Elias's sons reached out to him. Slowly, fear gave way to pride. They understood what their father had done, what he had sacrificed and what he had protected, the right to know the truth, no matter the cost. Bianca was found alive, hidden under a witness protection program with a new identity. In her first public statement, she wept. She confirmed everything, and before turning off the camera, she said, "If it weren't for him, no one would know what really happened. Thank you, Elias." And that sealed the story. The invisible man had become eternal, even if he stayed out of sight. Because his mission wasn't to be seen. It was to see what no one else dared to. Years later, an international documentary told the story, The Driver and the Invisible Empire. Elias never took part in the interviews, never appeared on screen. He had chosen a quiet life in another state under a new name, with less than he had before, but far more peace. Yet everyone knew he was still out there, in every sharper question, in every citizen who refused to stay silent, in every whisper that turned into a voice. Elias had planted a seed, and now it grew into courage, into awareness, into rebellion, because the unlikely hero had shown the world that justice doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be possible, and sometimes all it takes is someone who refuses to quit. In the end, this wasn't just Elias's story, it was ours, about what we're capable of when pain becomes power and fear gives way to conviction, about how often we avoid the truth because it's easier not to see. But more than anything, it was about hope, because even in the darkest corners of corruption, there's always someone willing to light a candle. And if you made it to the end of this story and felt it hit your heart, subscribe to the channel, leave a like and comment below. Would you have the courage to do what Elias did? Maybe you're the next unlikely hero.